The wind carried the scent of dry leaves and distant pine as it rustled through the quiet streets of a small Oregon town. It was early autumn, cool, crisp, the kind of day where every footstep echoed over scattered foliage and the golden light filtered softly through turning trees. Frank Donovan walked slowly along the sidewalk, his cane tapping with each measured step. His right hand trembled slightly, the way it always did now. Parkinson's had crept in over the past 2 years. First a nuisance, then a presence he couldn't ignore. He was in his early 60s, still broad-shouldered, still sharp-eyed, but the tremors, the stiffness, the slower speech, they were all reminders that his body no longer took orders the way it used to. Still, Frank remained proud. He didn't ask for help, didn't want pity. He was a soldier, a former Green Beret, a survivor of 3 tours in Afghanistan, and though those days were long past, the discipline remained. Every morning he got up, shaved, tied his boots, and walked to the post office on Main Street. A routine, a ritual, something steady in a world that was beginning to shake beneath him. That afternoon, as he turned the corner behind the old bakery, now closed, he caught a glimpse of movement near a row of dumpsters. At first, he thought it was a pile of discarded clothing, but then he saw the eyes. A German shepherd, lying on its side, ribs sharp beneath a filthy coat, barely breathing. Frank stopped. The cane wobbled in his grip. He blinked once, twice. Jesus! He stepped closer, the air suddenly colder than it had been a second ago. The dog didn't move. Its chest rose shallowly, and flies hovered near its torn ear. But what made Frank freeze wasn't the condition of the animal. It was the scar. A small, crescent-shaped mark just under the left eye. A scar Frank had seen every day for 4 years, through sandstorms, firefights, and silent nights in enemy territory. "Max," he whispered. His voice cracked as he knelt, the tremble in his knees more from shock than age. "Max? Boy?" The dog didn't respond, didn't lift its head. Frank felt his throat tighten. His hand, shaking harder now, reached forward, brushing gently against the matted fur. Then, from the stillness, a sound, a soft whimper. Mac's ear twitched, his eyes fluttered open, clouded, dulled, but still holding something Frank recognized instantly. Recognition, pain, and loyalty. Frank leaned closer, his voice steadied just enough to say the old command, the one they'd practiced countless times in the dunes of Kandahar. "Aufstehen, Soldat." "Rise, soldier." The reaction was slow, labored, but real. Max groaned, pushed his front legs forward, and slowly dragged himself toward Frank. His tail thumped weakly against the concrete. He pressed his head into Frank's knee and let out a shuddering sigh. Frank bent over him, arms wrapping around the broken body of the dog who had once pulled him from a minefield. His own body trembled now, not from Parkinson's, but from grief, from disbelief, from the kind of heartbreak only felt by soldiers who had already lost too much. "You found me," he whispered. "After all this time, you found me." And there, behind a grocery store dumpster on a street most had long forgotten, a soldier and his war dog were reunited. Not in glory, but in ruin. But they were together, and that, for now, was enough. The veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Frank sat rigidly in the corner chair of the exam room, his cane propped against the wall, hands clenched in his lap, as he watched the vet gently examine Max. The once mighty German shepherd lay on the cold metal table, too weak to lift his head, eyes half closed, but still watching Frank. Every movement seemed to hurt him. Stiff joints, raw patches of skin, his breathing shallow but steady. His fur was thin in places, and the muscles that once carried him across deserts and war zones had shriveled to bones under skin. Dr. Patel, a kind-eyed woman with years of experience treating military animals, finished her assessment and looked at Frank with a heavy expression. "He's severely malnourished," she said quietly. "Advanced arthritis in both hips, multiple old injuries, some of which never healed properly. There's an infection in his right foreleg, and—" She paused, pressing her lips together. "His microchip was removed. Surgically. Sloppily." Frank's fists tightened. "So no one knows he's military?" Dr. Patel shook her head. "No records trace back. It's like someone erased him on purpose." Frank looked down at Max, chest rising with each slow, painful breath. Rage simmered beneath his sadness, slow and sharp. "He served longer than most men," Frank muttered, "and they tossed him out like garbage." He took Max home that day, wrapped in a thick blanket, set up a bed beside the old wood stove, fed him by hand, coaxing water into his mouth with a dropper when he was too weak to drink. Through shaking hands and unsteady feet, Frank did everything himself, but he couldn't stay silent. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, opened his old laptop, and typed a post on a private forum for retired Special Operations veterans. He included a photo of Max curled by the fire and a few simple words. "He dragged me out of a minefield in Helmand. He sniffed out 2 IEDs that would have killed my team. He didn't leave me behind in war, but they left him behind at home." He went to bed thinking only a few old buddies might see it. By morning his inbox had exploded. The post had been shared, then reshared, then picked up by national veteran groups, animal rescue networks, and canine handler associations. Within 48 hours it had gone viral. Millions of views, tens of thousands of comments. Photos of Max, frail but proud, circulated online. People were furious. Former soldiers recounted similar stories of dogs who vanished after service, dogs who never made it home. Civilians demanded answers. Advocacy groups released statements condemning the system. TV anchors quoted Frank's line, "He didn't leave me behind," with visible emotion. A retired canine handler from Florida wrote, "Every handler knows. Those dogs would die for us, and too many are discarded when they're done being useful. Max deserves better, they all do." Petitions sprang up overnight demanding legislative change. One senator called for an official inquiry into how military working dogs were handled after retirement. Max had become more than a dog. He had become a symbol not of war, but of loyalty returned with neglect. And in the middle of it all stood Frank. Trembling hands, aging body, but with a voice that now carried across a nation. He hadn't asked for attention. He'd only wanted to do right by his partner. But something had begun, and this time no one was going to leave Max behind. The days that followed were quiet, but filled with purpose. Frank's small home, once too silent for comfort, now carried the soft sounds of paws on hardwood floors, the clinking of bowls, and the steady rhythm of a man rediscovering his reason to get up every morning. Parkinson's still made things difficult. His hands trembled when he poured water, his knees locked unpredictably, and he moved slower than he used to. But he found a kind of steady courage in Max's presence. Caring for his old partner became a mission. Every morning Frank crushed Max's antibiotics and mixed them into soft food, spoon-feeding him when his jaw was too sore to chew. He washed the dirt and fleas from the dog's matted coat, trimming knots with trembling fingers and whispering to him the entire time, "We're going to get through this, soldier. You and me." Max began to change. The cloudiness in his eyes faded. He started lifting his head more often. Then he stood. Then he took a few shaky steps. Frank, moved by the progress, designed a makeshift walking frame for Max. PVC piping, a sling harness, and old straps from his field gear. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Day by day, Max walked farther, stronger, taller, and every morning just after sunrise, the two of them would take slow walks down to the local park, Frank with his cane, Max in his harness. Side by side like the old days. People in the neighborhood began recognizing them. Some offered a wave, others simply watched in silence as the two moved across the path like a pair of aging warriors. Scarred, slow, but proud. Back at home, Frank began writing. He pulled out his old field journals, notes from missions, crumpled letters, and started piecing together the story of his time with Max. He wanted to remember the raids they'd survived, the nights under foreign stars, the times Max had sensed danger before anyone else. It became a ritual. Each evening, he'd sit at his kitchen table, notebook open, Max curled at his feet. He wrote not for glory, but for gratitude. Then came the afternoon that reminded him just how much Max still had left to give. Frank had been pushing himself hard with his at-home physical therapy. He was halfway through a balance routine when his left leg gave out without warning. He fell hard onto the floor of the living room, pain flashing through his hip and shoulder. He cursed, rolled to one side, tried to push himself up, but his arm shook too violently. His cane was out of reach. Before he could call out, Max was already there. The dog's ears were forward, eyes alert. He didn't bark, didn't panic. He stepped forward, placed his head gently under Frank's arm and shifted his weight. Steady, patient. Frank hesitated, then grabbed hold of Max's harness. The dog didn't move. With effort, Frank pulled himself upright, using Max's body like a railing until he was sitting on the edge of the couch. Max sat in front of him, chest rising and falling, eyes never leaving Frank's face. Frank reached out, hand shaking, and ruffled the fur between his ears. "You're still watching my six, huh?" he murmured. Max let out a soft huff, the way he used to when they were hiding behind broken walls in faraway places. And in that quiet moment, Frank realized something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not duty, not routine, but peace. Because some bonds don't end when the war is over. Some brothers never stop protecting each other. The sun shone gently through the tall oaks of Riverside Park, dappling the ground with gold and casting long, graceful shadows. The annual Canine Memorial Day was in full swing, a quiet but honorable gathering of retired handlers, veterans, their families, and the loyal dogs who had served beside them. Flags waved softly in the breeze, and the distant sound of a bugle echoed across the grass. Frank stood near the memorial wall, his cane planted firmly in the grass, one hand resting gently on Max's back. The old German shepherd sat beside him, his head high, eyes calm, a red service bandana tied neatly around his neck. Though his fur had thinned and his joints ached, he still carried himself with the quiet dignity of a soldier. Frank had debated attending at all. Large crowds weren't easy for him anymore, but he'd wanted to show Max off, let people see that old warriors, even wounded ones, still stood tall, and Max had earned that right more than anyone. Children laughed and played nearby, families picnicked under the trees, and a choir began to rehearse quietly near the small lakeside amphitheater. It was a beautiful, peaceful day. Then, a scream. It came sharp and sudden, a mother's voice cutting through the calm. Frank turned quickly, his eyes following hers to the water. A small boy, no more than 5 or 6, had slipped on the muddy bank of the lake. He had fallen in head first, and his tiny arms flailed, panic-stricken. There was a moment's pause, the kind that always comes before chaos. People froze, unsure what to do. A few stepped forward, but hesitated near the edge. The water was deeper than it looked, the shore slick and unstable, but Max didn't hesitate. Despite the pain in his joints and the stiffness in his limbs, the old dog charged forward. His hind legs trembled with every step, but his will was unshakable. "Max!" Frank shouted instinctively, but not to stop him. His voice rose, firm and clear. "Go, boy, go get him!" Max plunged into the water. Frank limped as fast as he could to the edge, heart pounding. "Straight ahead, good boy, Max, steady!" The boy was struggling, slipping under. Max swam hard, powerful strokes cutting through the water like old muscle memory. He reached the child just as he sank beneath the surface. With practiced precision, Max grabbed the back of the boy's jacket and turned toward shore. "Come on, partner," Frank whispered, breath caught in his throat. "Bring him home." Cheers erupted as Max neared the bank. A pair of bystanders rushed in and lifted the child from the water, gasping and sobbing, but alive. Max clawed his way onto land behind them, soaked and wheezing, legs shaking. Frank dropped to one knee beside him, ignoring the pain in his own joints, cradling Max's face in his hands. "You did it. You crazy, incredible boy, you did it." The crowd closed in, not in panic now, but in awe. People clapped, some cried. Others stood still, hands over their hearts. Later that evening, the story was everywhere. Retired war dog saves child in heroic act. The soldier who never stopped serving. Mac's face, wet, tired, and noble, was on every local news channel. A hero, once again. Because some warriors don't know how to stop protecting, not even when the battle is over. Months passed, and the story of Mac's heroism continued to ripple outward, beyond headlines, beyond social media shares. It touched people in quiet ways, especially veterans and canine handlers who knew the weight of silence after service. Frank, never one for fanfare, found himself at the center of a movement. Letters poured in, thank you notes from former soldiers, photos of retired K9s, donations from strangers. They didn't want to forget Max. They didn't want to forget any of them. So Frank did something he never thought he would. With the help of a few close friends, he founded Max's Mission, a non-profit dedicated to providing medical care, shelter, and support for retired military and police dogs, as well as elderly veterans living alone. It was part tribute, part promise. No more forgotten heroes, no more brothers left behind. Max's face became the symbol of the mission, calm, proud, a little gray around the muzzle but fierce in spirit. Then came the ceremony. In a packed veterans hall filled with handlers, officers, families, and service dogs in uniformed vests, Max was awarded the National Service Animal Medal of Dedication, an honor rarely given but fully deserved. Frank stepped up to the podium, hands shaking slightly, not from nerves but from Parkinson's, and looked out at the sea of people. His voice was quiet but steady. "We both aged," he said. "We both hurt, but he never once stopped showing up for me. Not in war, not in peace, not in pain. Every day he stood by me. Every day he remembered who we were." Applause rose. Max sat beside him on stage, tail wagging gently, eyes scanning the room like he was still on duty. And when the flashbulbs faded and the crowd went home, Frank and Max returned to their small home on the edge of town, where the real memories live. One quiet evening, the sky turning amber with the fading sun, Max lay curled on the wooden porch, head resting gently against Frank's boot. The air was still, peaceful. Frank reached down, stroking the soft fur behind Max's ears. His voice came as a whisper. "We fought. We survived, and we came home together. That's all I ever wanted." Max didn't move, but his eyes closed slowly, and his tail gave a single, steady thump. They had given everything, and in the end, they had found everything that mattered, because a soldier and his dog, forgotten by the world, had found meaning, purpose, and healing in the only place that truly counted, in each other. Some heroes never ask for medals, some never speak a word, but their loyalty echoes louder than any battle cry. Max and Frank's journey reminds us that brotherhood doesn't end when the war does, and that even in silence, love remembers. A forgotten dog, a retired soldier, two lives left behind until they found each other again and changed the world in the process. If this story moved your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories, where the quietest heroes and the greatest acts of love are never forgotten. Because every paw print has a purpose, and every bond leaves a legacy.